very looking forward to becoming an Avenger then as well. So guys, our next speaker really honestly needs no introduction. He is a ShipItCon fan favourite, and he's back to grace our stage to share and drop more knowledge as he peels the onion of uncertainty. Rob is a systems thinker, passionate about learning better ways of solving problems for people and software, the director of engineering at GlowFox, christened SpongeBob Test Pants, and continuously sharing his knowledge with the testing community. Please give it up for Rob Meaney.
Imagine for a moment sitting with your team as your CEO announces to the entire company that the product that you've been working on for the last 3 years is a failure. I've been there. 3 years of blood, sweat, and tears, all for nothing. Just 12 months before that point, we'd spoken to the sales team and they'd promised us, if you just deliver these 6 specific features, that it will unlock 1.2 million euro in revenue. We listened, we delivered, we waited. Nothing changed, and ultimately the product was a failure. So Ray Dalio has this nice saying, every time you confront something painful, you're at a potentially important juncture in your life. You have the opportunity to choose healthy and painful truth, or unhealthy but comfortable delusion. So my healthy but painful truth was that my 15-plus year career in software at that time had been absolutely littered with these failures. Some were massive, some were small. But I could hardly think of a single significant win that I've had during my career, anything really impactful that I'd released, because my career to that point had been a series of sending things into production and only reacting when things went wrong, a kind of fire and fair type engineering. So while I was reflecting on those 15 years wasted and on that 3 years that we'd wasted on that product, I had a profound realization. The only certainty in software product development is that we will be wrong. I'm going to repeat it. The only certainty in software product development is that we'll be wrong. We'll be wrong about our business strategy. We'll be wrong about who our customers are. We'll be wrong about the problems we choose to solve for those customers. We'll be wrong about the solutions we choose to solve those problems. We'll be wrong around how we design, develop, test, operate our software. And we'll be wrong about our ways of working that we use to do all the above. So I call this idea the onion of uncertainty. It's a crazy analogy. I like Monty Python, what can I say? So the idea with this is that all the big, impactful decisions are at the very outside of the onion, the decisions about business strategy and who our customers are. And as we move through the layers, those decisions get less and less significant in terms of their impact as we get down into the center, into the tiniest unit of code. And this creates almost like a causal network of guesses as we move from the outside of the onion all the way through to the inside of the onion. And the only way to validate those guesses is to get working software into the hands of our users and gather feedback. The problem typically that we face is, typically in engineering, we focus on the very center of the onion, in the areas where decision-making is under our control for the most part, rather than focusing on the outer parts of the onion, where the size of the impact of those decisions is far more significant. So we spend so much time and effort building the wrong thing righter when we should be focused on questioning our decisions from the outside inwards. So this guy, Ronnie Kahavi, tells us that we're building all the wrong stuff in the software industry. He's got years of research, and software initiative failure rates of 66% in Microsoft demonstrate this, 85% in Bing, 50% in Amazon, who are the industry leaders, 92% in Airbnb, whatever they're doing, Booking.com and Google Ads between 80 and 90%. And these are really, really good companies. So he has a rule of thumb that he uses. He says, be ready to fail 80% of the time. So 80% of everything that we're working on is waste. So having experienced my fill of failure and waste, 5 years ago, I set about finding ways of building truly impactful software in an uncertain world. So before I get into the stories and the outcomes and the lessons and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to go through some of the foundational ideas that have allowed our teams in GlowFox first survive, but ultimately then thrive in unprecedented uncertainty. So the first one at the very outside of the onion is related to strategic uncertainty, okay? So the ideas come from a book called The Art of Action by Stephen Bungay, and the key premise here is that our leaders want to lead with intent. What do we mean by intent? We want to talk about what we're trying to achieve, or the outcome, and why, the motive. So when our leaders communicate the context and intent clearly, it creates alignment across the business and across the teams. And then we want leaders to give teams the autonomy to exercise their judgment on how they achieve those outcomes. So the first principle I wanted to leave you with was lead with context and intent, not control. Moving in on the onion, we move towards uncertainty around decision making. So the key idea here comes from a book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, strategist and former professional poker player, pretty cool. And she talks about, the quality of our life, and it applies to business as well, being determined by two things. The first is luck, which is neither predictable or controllable. And the second is the quality of our decision making. Now, the quality of our decision making, too, is determined by two factors, right? It's determined by hidden information and our biases. So by hidden information, what she talks about is the information that we don't know and the information that we can't know, unknowns and knowns and all that kind of good stuff. And then we have the biases. So there's biases like type 1 errors or false positives, where you create these causal relationships where they don't exist. And then there's motivated reasoning or confirmation bias and hindsight bias and all this kind of good stuff. But in business, we need to treat every decision we make like a bet. There's a probabilistic likelihood of success. And if we think in economic terms about these things as bet, there's a selection. When are we successful, or when are we failure, or when have we failed? There are odds in terms of the likelihood of success. There's a stake, and typically when we talk about stakes, I talk in terms of time and effort. For our dev teams, I say it's about 10,000 euro per week. And in our return, which is the return on investment for our business, which is typically revenue or something like that. So when people approach us with certainty, saying, oh, this will definitely work, what we tend to do is ask the question, do you want to bet on that? Because it gets people think a little differently about their reasoning, looking at the biases and looking for information that they don't have. So the second principle is invest based on evidence, not opinion. So we want to gather both qualitative and quantitative evidence to make our decision making in the probabilistic world. So moving in again in the onion, we come to uncertainty about our users. The ideas here come from Badass by Cathy Sierra, and she talks about user obsession, essentially. So she says users don't care about your product, they care about the results that your product allows your users to achieve, okay? So we want to be able to say our product makes our users so successful in their given context that our users kick your users' ass to our competition. So the third principle here is making our users successful makes us successful. So if we can focus on understanding what are the key things that our users are trying to do and what success looks like for them, and we can allow our product to allow them to be successful, that will result in increased revenue for our business. Moving in again, we come to a book called User Story Mapping by a guy called Jeff Patton, one of the most impactful books I've ever read in my career. And he talks a lot about the idea of shared understanding and creating shared understanding in your team. So the fourth principle here is minimize output and maximize outcome and impact. So we don't develop software just to create more stuff. We create software in order to drive outcomes for our users. And if we can drive outcomes for our users, which is a leading indicator of success, that in turn will drive business impact for our organization. So ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to minimize the amount of time and effort we invest to get the maximum outcomes. So we want to minimize the number of features and enhancements and all those kinds of things that we build in order to maximize the outcomes for our customers or users and the impact for our business. Principle 5 is the team is the unit of delivery. We start together and we finish together. So we have cross-functional teams with developers, designers, testers, product managers, and so on and so forth. Everyone involved in taking something from concept all the way through to customer, and we work together all along that, from the problem all the way to the solution, and gathering feedback and iterating from there. And the sixth principle here is think big, start small, and learn fast. So we want, as a team, we want to think about the big picture and the long term. Where are we going with this in the long term? Think about the breadth of the product to understand the consequences of change on the whole product. Then we want to start super small by slicing it down to the smallest, most valuable thing that we can release. And then we want to get that into production quickly so that we can gather feedback from our customers and iterate from there. And at the very center of the onion, there's a book here that everyone's probably familiar with. It's called Accelerate by Dr. Nicole Forsgren. And this is about dealing with uncertainty related to implementation and operation, I guess. And for this, we want to focus on flow and feedback. So principle 7, fewer, smaller things together, talks about how we can limit the amount of things that we're focusing on in our department and in our teams. So we want to focus on the most important thing, not many things, but the most important thing. So we want to limit that work in process. Smaller things means slicing those things down into the smallest, most valuable thing that we can deliver as quickly as possible. So we want to slice, and we take a slice down to a story, and a story down to a tiny PR. A tiny PR gets developed quicker, it gets tested quicker, it gets released quicker, and it gets us feedback much, much, much more quickly. Principle 8 is optimize your systems for change, not success. So successful systems evolve by quickly and safely iterating through the fail, learn, and adapt cycle. So when it comes to architecture, when it comes to our ways of working and all this stuff, rather than aiming for perfection from the start, we want to optimize and design our systems to facilitate change. Because we know we're going to fail, we know we're going to learn, and we're going to have to change this system as a result of what we learn. So having seen the green shoots of success in my previous company, Populo, I decided to take these ideas and apply them in a new and challenging context. GlowFox, and for those of you who don't know what GlowFox is, it's a SaaS product that provides a solution to fitness entrepreneurs all over the world. I think we're 60 different countries. And we've got millions of members as well. But what did GlowFox look like when I joined 3.5, nearly 4 years ago? So decisions about our roadmap, deadlines, and process came from the top down. Scrum was used, but it was effectively product owners handing fully formed tasks to individual developers and telling them to get on with it. It was a feature factory, right? We just produced features and moved on. Quality and tech debt weren't even on the agenda. But we had a really passionate and ambitious team that wanted GlowFox to be successful, so I was really into helping them achieve that. The big elephant in the room, of course, was just before I had joined GlowFox, GlowFox had signed a huge contract with a company called Lift Brands. So Lift Brands have 1,100 locations across 15 different countries, and we just signed up to do the biggest migration that was ever completed in the fitness industry. But also in the contract, we had to deliver this huge list of features, and to add a little bit of spice to the situation, COVID kicked off about 2 months into that. So how was I going to achieve the most positive impact in the shortest amount of time? So we started at the inside of the onion, and we worked outwards from there. So we started by focusing on delivery in order to just survive in this difficult situation. So the first thing we did was we looked at Accelerate. So we needed to improve the stability and the throughput of our systems. So we knew that we needed to deal with the quality issues and the technical debt, but also we had to create an engine that allowed us to deliver on that Lift roadmap. So we set about working on our continuous delivery practices, focusing on the pipelines, adding test automation, monitoring, all the kind of good stuff that we usually go about there. From an architectural perspective, we orientated our teams around domains. We split them out and created, looser coupling between the teams that allowed them to work more independently. From a product and process perspective, we began to get our teams to talk to customers, imagine, and implement Kanban. So we had boards, we visualized the work, we limited work in process, and we started doing continuous improvement. From a lean management and monitoring perspective, again, we started visualizing things at the department level. So we had a department level stand-up and a board, and the work was used to flow through that into each of the teams' board. Focusing on operability as well and observability, we started using tooling like Honeycomb and New Relic and all that good stuff to understand what was happening in production. And lastly, culture. We started establishing a generative culture focused on learning, collaboration, and experimentation. Started doing things like video clubs with the teams to learn new ideas, blameless postmortems, and all that kind of good stuff. But in order to deliver on these things in the Lift roadmap that were, really tight deadlines to achieve, we needed to use the ideas from user story mapping to slice these things down super small, deliver them fast, and iterate based on feedback from their customer. So what did that process look like? So we took our teams, who were this whole cross-functional teams, and we started with the problem. We'd frame the problem with the who, or the users whose lives are impacted by the stuff, the what, in terms of the outcomes those users were trying to achieve, and the why, what was the business impact for Glowfox. So obviously, as you can tell, we're beginning to start with some of the talk of the outside of the onion. We visualized the user flows to create common understanding of the problem to be solved. And then as a team, we'd ideate and slice down the proposed solution into the smallest, most impactful thing that we could learn from. So while navigating the Lift roadmap, I continued to share my vision for how we wanted to work in the future. I shared my vision for these empowered, autonomous teams focused on business impact, driven by customer outcomes through a process of experimentation, working from the outside of the onion inwards. And then it finally happened. We got the opportunity to actually implement some of these ideas. So we started at the outside of the onion, firstly with the business impact we were trying to achieve for Glowfox, and then making a guess as to what customer outcome would drive that business impact. Then thinking about, from our members' perspective, what member behavior would drive that customer outcome, and ultimately placing a bet, a small little bet, doing a retro on that bet, and then iterating based on what we learned. So, for those of you that don't know this guy, his name is Fernando. Fernando is team lead of the mobile team. I manage Fernando and the team. And he was a bit of a celebrity in Ireland for a while because he was pronounced dead by a soccer team in Dublin in order to avoid playing a football match. But he is alive, and still alive and working with us. But his team decided they wanted to try this approach. They weren't on the Lift roadmap. They had the time and scope to take it on, so we went ahead and did that. So the first problem that we took on with the mobile team was electronic waivers. And the problem here was that so what are electronic waivers? Essentially, when our customers, they want their members to sign a waiver to say, if I have a heart attack, I'm not going to sue, okay? Yeah, this is essentially what it is. So we had that feature set, but our customers were threatening to churn. Why were they threatening to churn? Only 12% of their members were signing these electronic waivers. Why? Because their members who were getting an email from us were not opening the emails and were not signing the emails. So we got the team together to discuss the problem and then to start guessing as to what we think we could do to solve this problem. Again, working from the onion, outside of the onion inwards. So we started with the business impact we wanted to achieve. We wanted to get to no revenue loss and 0% churn as a result of e-waivers. From a customer outcome perspective, we guessed that if we could get over 85% of new members to sign the waivers, that would represent success and that would, have that business impact. From a membership's behavior, we decided that greater than 80% of new members signing the waivers in the app would probably result in that success. And our first bet as a team was, if we just simply enable the ability to sign a waiver in the app and add the instrumentation, that could be a good first guess. So this is what it looked like, a very simple addition to the app. You can see the documents on the left, and on the right, when you click into it, you can sign the waiver. So typically when we did data-focused retros after doing a slice, we work from the inside of the onion out. So we talk about the team-based metrics first. We talk about things like how long did the slice take, how many deployments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, the bet took us 1 month, and we kind of said, well, that's quite a big chunk. That's a big slice. It drove 22% of new member sign-ups for the waiver, 34% of new members signed for the waivers, and ultimately, in terms of business impact, there was no immediate impact because it's a lagging indicator. So we were pretty happy. We'd improved things, but we hadn't hit our success criteria. So then the team decided to have a conversation, what's the next thing we could do based on the data we have? So the most obvious thing that the team was talking about was blocking all functionality in the app, so that if a member logged in and they didn't have the waiver signed, they couldn't make a booking, they couldn't buy a membership, they couldn't do anything, and that would essentially drive them to sign this waiver. But Fernando said, you know those annoying little red dots notifications that pop up in the app? They drive me absolutely crazy, and I think we could implement something in a couple of days that might be a good bet. Whereas the other blocking option was hugely risky and would have taken a huge amount of time. So we said, right, let's give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? So this is what it looked like, top left-hand corner, red annoying dot, on the notification thing. Happy days, right? So again, we did our data-focused retro on slice 2. We did the team analysis at the very inside of the onion. 3 days of effort it took us. Member behavior, 89% of new members signed the waiver app. 92% of members signed the waivers. From a customer outcome perspective, we achieved our goal of no revenue loss and 0% churn. And the team was just like, okay, we're done. We don't have to do any more. What's going on here? So the team had achieved their success. They didn't have to block all the functionality. And to be quite honest, their minds were absolutely blown. They were like, okay, we're done? What? This has never happened before. We're just done with the feature. Oh, crazy. So we showcased our approach and the results at the company all hands. The team were absolutely buzzing about this. And the feedback was hugely positive from the other teams, from the leadership team, and from across the business. The mobile team were absolutely hooked. They'd gotten this taste for this kind of outcome-driven, iterative approach to software development, and they were just like, no, I need more. So anyway, they continued to kind of fine-tune this process. So over the next weeks and months, they fine-tuned. They got better at defining the success metrics and the various customer metrics together as a team. They got even better at slicing things super, super, super small into tiny little bets. And they got better at the process of reviewing those metrics together to make better decisions on the next slice and iteration. The most satisfying thing of this whole journey wasn't the business impact, but seeing a product development team so engaged, so aligned, and so happy in their work. I'd literally never seen it before. So then myself and Fernando, we started pairing with all the other team leads. And then we hit our next major milestone, which was a massive initiative that spanned 3 different product development teams, lots of dependencies, as you can imagine. So one of our most requested features was a thing called spot booking, whereby people going to, say, a spinning class or whatever can book a spot. And our customers were churning. We were losing sales because customers that had spinning classes or boxing classes, it was causing a lot of confusion and tension in classes when people arrived and they couldn't pick their spots, as you can imagine. So we looked at it 12 months beforehand, and there was an enormous estimate of something like 9 to 12 months, huge amounts of complexity. We'd have to modify the existing booking flow, and we might have to do an interactive floor plan and all this kind of crazy complex stuff. It could have exploded into something massive. So what we decided to do is take this approach. We sliced it down to what I call an embarrassingly small or simple solution that we got working in 2.5 weeks. It was like this solution in the mobile app only, where we had hard-coded spots that people could pick, and we rolled it out to 4 locations. So what we did after that first slice is we gathered the data from Looker, Mixpanel, Google Analytics. Again, we'd gotten better at gathering all this data. We did a retro, 24 releases, 2.5 weeks, 4 locations were using this. 68% of classes were using spot booking. Of those 68% of classes, they had a 55% reservation rate, 34% abandonment rate, and the number 1 reason to skip was lacking room map. So we talked to our customers. We gathered, as I said, we have both qualitative and quantitative feedback. And we got feedback that spot visibility on the dashboard was an issue, confusion with the quick booking was an issue, room map and all that stuff was an issue. And then we also talked about the collaboration process, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive for the 3 teams involved again. So we continued to iterate and gather feedback from our customers and did a further 8 slices. So we took us a total of 9 slices and 3 months and released this to 34 locations and got to the point where they were happily using this solution. So we as a team decided we're ready to roll out this solution to the entire customer base at this point. So reviewing the outcome, we had invested 3 months of effort. We were now receiving 0 complaints in class as a result of the frustration of not being able to find your spot when you go along. We have now over 75% spot booking reservation rate, and we had 100% reduction in lost sales as a result of not having spot booking within 2 months, so a month before we got to full rollout. So what we did is we uncovered 20% of the functionality that delivered 80% of the value for our customers. So then I decided, maybe we can apply this same approach, the same idea with the onion to bugs and technical debt. So traditionally in GlowFox, one of the areas with most complexity, most technical debt and bugs was an area called memberships, a domain called memberships. And that had impacted the whole platform. So we decided to take the same approach with bugs and technical debt in the memberships team. So we started with the business impact again. So we wanted to reduce churn due to bugs by 15%. We wanted to reduce the bug-related customer support tickets by 30%. From a customer outcome perspective, the goal was 0 P1 bugs across the whole platform, which was ambitious. We'd never achieved that. From a team outcome perspective, what we decided to do is create 5 critical core indicators of customer pain. So essentially, these were what I would call always true or never true rules in the memberships context. So these were queries that allow us to identify specific members that are breaking these rules. So we had 5 key critical indicators. For example, one rule might be a member could only ever have 1 active membership. So if we could do queries to find anyone that had more than 1 active membership, we knew we had a problem. So we had 5 of these key metrics and queries. And the first slice was to put those 5 queries in place and gather the data. The second slice was to identify of all the data, the inconsistent data problems that we'd identified, to break these into buckets. The one with the biggest number of members was the first slice. We implemented a data fix for all those members. And then we had monitoring so that once we'd fixed the data, if we saw that number grow again, we knew we had an active bug, so then we could go in, investigate that active bug, and fix it. So what did we achieve? We fixed over 60,000 data inconsistencies across the platform. We got all of those key pain indicators impacting less than 100 members. The reason it's 100 members is because there's diminishing returns. You know, if you try and get it down to like the last one, it's going to take you 8 months. We got to 0 P1 bugs for the first time in our entire history in GlowFox. And we had record low churn due to bugs. We reduced it by 20% rather than 15%. And CS-related tickets went down 55%, which was pretty outstanding, I thought. So to recap on the underlying principles, lead with context and intent, not control. Invest based on evidence, not opinion. Making our users successful makes us successful. Minimize output and maximize outcome and impact. The team is the unit of delivery. We start together, we finish together. Think big, start small, learn fast. Work on fewer, smaller things together, and optimize systems for change, not success. Now, unpeeling the onion has driven business impact business impact for GlowFox. It's driven customer success for our customers. It's improved the experience for their members, and it's driven satisfaction in our product development teams. So the last underlying principle is that happy teams drive high performance. So in my experience, when you cultivate an environment where teams are empowered to unpeel the onion from the outside in, when they exemplify all those principles I talked with, you get happy, high-performing teams as a second-order effect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Rob. As usual, always dropping the golden nuggets. Rob will be here and will be able to answer all your Q&A, so make sure to be sending them in. So before I introduce our next speaker, I wanted to thank you all for